Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for a very interesting talk. You've talked about quite a big programme of very exciting cultural activities in London. Cultural diplomacy is obviously a really important part of the embassy. What do you do exactly to prepare the ground? How do you prepare the host culture to receive the cultural diplomacy that you actively promote?
Ambassador, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I think we've been very lucky. We've been very lucky because the UK in general, the United Kingdom, it's a country that understands the power of cultural diplomacy. If you look at country lists in which they classify how powerful a country is in terms of its soft power, the UK is always on top of those lists. So in the UK, we haven't had many challenges because there's a great understanding of how cultural diplomacy works and why cultural diplomacy is important. So in this sense, we did manage to work, and it was a challenge to work with different publics because the main purpose of our program was to create new publics and to reach different audiences so that our cultural diplomacy efforts could eventually result in a positive impact. But in the UK it has been easier. I think in other countries where cultural diplomacy is not as used or is not as understood, the challenge is a bigger one. And I think in this sense you have to work hard on being as encompassing as possible and bringing to the table not only governmental counterparts like the host government, but also bring diaspora. If you have people of your country living there, you have to bring the public, public stakeholders, civil society organizations, and ideally as well private companies. So by having all these interlocutors, you'll make it easier to understand how that specific country and nation works in terms of its cultural relations, and it will make it better for your program or for your cultural diplomacy efforts to succeed.
You mentioned one of the key factors in successful cultural diplomacy is knowing how to measure success. How do you measure whether a program has been successful?
Where we'll develop indicators that will allow us by the end of this year to know, on the one hand, how many people attended each of the events that we plan and program, that will allow us to understand the far reach of the events, in the sense that not only getting to know how many people attended, but let's say how many newspapers or television networks or websites talked about the events and the reach of each of those. And we developed indicators as well that will allow us to know the return or the financial and economic return of each of the events. So these indicators we developed to get to know how our program will be successful or not, or the degree of success of our program. But I do believe that every effort of cultural diplomacy will need very specific indicators because each effort is different.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.